President Biden yesterday also unveiled a budget blueprint for the fiscal year 2023. Under his proposal, the United States would allocate billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. It will also tax the wealthy and lower the national deficit. Biden is proposing a total of $5.8 trillion in federal spending. The deficit would be $1.15 trillion. There would be $795 billion spent on defense, $915 billion on domestic programs, and the remaining balance would go to mandatory spending, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and net interest on the national debt. Biden also proposed a $6.9 billion infusion of funding for Ukraine to assist the country in defending against Russia's invasion, as well as to aid NATO. Another $1 billion would go towards Washington's efforts to counter Moscow's influence in the region. And as we told you yesterday, the wealthy in America will be additionally taxed. The Biden administration has now proposed a minimum tax of 20% on the income of taxpayers who make more than $100 million. The document also calls for more money to be spent on the police and greater funding for education, public health and housing. The proposal would also lower the U.S. budget deficit by $1.3 trillion next year, though the nearly $25 trillion national debt would continue to increase.
This year we're on track to cut the deficit by more than $1.3 trillion. $1.3 trillion. That would be the largest one-year reduction in the deficit in U.S. history. And here's how we're achieving it, this record deficit reduction. First, we're growing the economy. We've created a record 6.7 million jobs since I took office, and we've generated a GDP growth of 5.7%, the best economic growth we've seen in this country in over 40 years. This has led to a substantial increase in government revenues and dramatically improved our fiscal situation.
The budget must, of course, be approved by Congress, which is controlled by the Democratic Party, but with only a wafer-thin majority. Ahead of the midterm elections, the Biden administration is struggling with record-low approval ratings. Let's go live now to my colleague Susan Tehrani, who joins us from the streets of New York again today. Susan, President Biden at the White House yesterday said that this budget absolutely proves to the United States what he and the Democrats value. But the big question hanging over this is going to be whether it can get through Congress.
Absolutely. And reaction, Simon, has really been falling along party lines regarding President Biden's aspirations for passing this budget ultimately on Capitol Hill for 2023. You know, what was interesting is one of headlines that I read was that, you know, President Biden moves to the center, and I was surprised to read that after as you were discussing earlier, he was really pounding on taxing the wealthy, even on unrealized assets and gains, which has never been done in the United States and will probably be dead on arrival when it reaches Capitol Hill. But I guess that headline was related to really putting more money into law enforcement, funding the police, and then also raising military spending, which also means, you know, the Navy as well, putting focus, of course, on America's bigger strategic challenge, which would be China, also America's nuclear capabilities as well. This was something that perhaps the left and the progressives won't be very happy with, considering the fact that they were hoping that this spending would be less after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, you know, moving center maybe in that sense, but, you know, putting the tax on the wealthy. And it's being said that the tax is on the most wealthy Americans, but, you know, it will trickle down on the wealthy, and that it will ultimately hit the middle class as well.
OK, lots of legislative back and forth ahead. Susan Tehrani live for us again on the streets of New York today. Thanks very much indeed.